This is Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, an in-depth interview with Alabama's top political newsmakers. Now, from the studios of Troy University, here is Steve Flowers.
I'm Steve Flowers, and welcome to Alabama Politics. Folks, we're fortunate tonight to have as our guest the young new state auditor of Alabama, Andrew Sorrell. And he hails from Muscle Shoals originally, and he's going to be our guest tonight. But he's all settled into his office. We talked about being on the show, prior to him. But he's gotten settled in. He took office in early part of January with other constitutional officers and getting settled in. And we just thank him for taking time out of his busy schedule to be with us. Thank you, Andrew.
Appreciate it, Steve. Always good to be with you.
Thank you. Yeah, you were with me during the campaign, early in your campaign.
That's right. When I was so early that when I was with you, I honestly don't think anybody expected me to win. But that's one of the beautiful things about politics is that a young guy from a small town like Muscle Shoals can actually, win a statewide race.
Well, you had two pretty good guys running against you. That guy from Birmingham that was a preacher had run before.
Correct.
And Rusty Glover really worked the state, and he'd run it twice.
Yeah.
He'd run statewide twice.
Well, and I really like Rusty Glover.
Everybody does.
He's a friend of mine, actually, and Stan Cook was a good man as well. And to be honest with you, I think the taxpayers would have been well served with any of the three of us that got elected. But I was fortunate enough to come in first in the runoff and then get the majority of votes. I think I got 57.5% roughly in the runoff. And as you know, I didn't have a Democrat opponent. So right. In essence, the primary ended it. I did have a Libertarian on the ballot against me in the fall, but nonetheless went on to win that race. And I'm proud to tell you, I actually got the highest percentage of any statewide candidate in Alabama on the ballot this time. So very
right?
Humbling. I sure did.
That is amazing, Andrew. That's impressive. Now, but you didn't have. I put two categories together. Those of you Republicans, any Republican's going to win statewide.
Correct.
So as I told you when you were on here, if you win the Republican primary, you're home free in Alabama. But there was a category who had Democrats and Libertarians.
Yes.
So I would gauge them on their vote against a Democrat and a Libertarian.
Fair.
You only had a Libertarian. Now, who all had just a Libertarian? You did. Wes Allen had a Democrat.
Wes Allen had a Democrat and a Libertarian, as did Kay Ivey and as did Katie Britt. So you're right. It's not a fair direct comparison between me and them because I didn't have the Democrat on there as well. However, Rick Pate, Will Ainsworth, Steve Marshall, a lot of other statewides. I think Young Boozer had a Libertarian. So there were quite a few of us, probably 4 or 5 at least, that had no Democrat, but we did have a Libertarian opponent. And when I say that I got the highest percentage, I mean I did, but it was all very close. I mean it was within about 1% of each other. But I thought that that must mean that the people of Alabama liked what I did in the legislature and liked my message that I had when I was running for state auditor.
Now, you have a similar background to Wes Allen in that Wes came out of the House after one term, and you came out of the House after one term. You just served one term in the House, didn't you?
Yeah, you're right. And it was a decision, do I run for state auditor now or do I wait? Because you got to figure whoever wins state auditor is probably going to do 2 terms.
Right.
So it's do I run now or do I wait another 8 years and run after I was 12 years in the legislature? And what we've seen from other candidates like John Merrill in the past is 1 term in the House and running statewide has worked for a lot of people.
That's right. And Ainsworth did it.
That's all. I forgot about that.
Ainsworth came out of the House the same way you did, and the same way West. There's no state senators coming up from winning statewide, but that's 4 in the last 2 quadrenniums.
That's correct, yeah.
You and Wes Allen, Wes coming from Troy,
yes,
serving 1 term in the House. You coming from Muscle Shoals 1 term in the House. Prior to that, John Merrill came from 1 term in Tuscaloosa.
And it's all young guys. If you look at the ages, I'm the youngest statewide constitutional office holder since Troy King in 2004. I think he was 34 when he got elected Attorney General. I was 36 when I won state auditor. Will Ainsworth was 37 when he won Lieutenant Governor. Wes Allen, I don't remember exactly, 45 or 46.
He's 45. He's
45.
He was probate judge about 10, 12 years.
That's correct, yeah. He was, and he actually ran and made a runoff. You probably remember this, for state auditor in 2006.
There was a large field, too.
There was. He made a runoff. He lost 51-49.
So he did make the runoff that year.
He did make the runoff. He very nearly was state auditor at age 30, which is incredible. But then he ended up getting appointed probate judge by the governor,
Right.
and then served a term in the House, and then you know the rest of the story.
Now, you know, I'm not trying to take away from Wes's vote total that time, but they were almost everybody in that race was basically unknown when he ran for alder. It had been 15, 16 years ago
Yeah,
when he
that's
ran
right.
that first time. But I have always noticed this, that he got a boost from being first on the ballot. If your name starts with an A, you got a pretty good start. I mean, I hate to say that.
It's true for lower level statewide
It
offices
is.
that people are not as familiar. If you're running for U.S. Senate or for
Different,
governor,
yeah.
it doesn't matter. But if you're running for state auditor, public service commission, you know, Circuit Court
Right.
of Appeals, any of those races, I do think you get a little bump from being first. And I'm almost always last on the ballot, which probably hurts
That
me.
might be, but there again, they may say, well, you know, I vote with the one at the end. The one in the middle gets, I think,
Gets
cheated.
overlooked, right?
I really think that's the one that gets. Let's see. So Rusty was in the middle, and he ran third, didn't he?
He
Didn't
did.
Cook run second to you?
That's
in that
correct,
race?
yes. If you look at what happened in the primary, it's so interesting because we each won our area of the state. So Rusty carried
they
away
knew where you
Mobile.
were from.
They knew.
Uh-huh.
And Stan Cook won Birmingham and all the central area of the state. I won North Alabama. The way that I was able to come in first, though, was there was no candidate from the Wiregrass.
So you worked the Wiregrass
I
pretty
worked the
hard.
Wiregrass, and I also knew turnout was going to be really high because Katie Britt was
Right.
from the Wiregrass.
Right.
Sure enough, top turnout in the state, Coffee County. I won Coffee County, got 46% in a three-way race, and I think the Wiregrass turning out so big really helped me. So I won 2 areas of the state, and they both only won 1 area in the runoff.
That was wise of you, Andrew, to realize that there was no Wiregrass candidate in that race.
That's right.
And you're right. There was a big turnout in the Wiregrass.
Yes. And then I knew for the runoff, I knew that something else was going to be true. Whoever got those third place votes, whoever got the Rusty Glover votes from Mobile and Baldwin County would probably win the race.
So you camped out in Mobile.
You're exactly right.
The
Extra
runoff,
money into that media market in the runoff for TV ads and radio, and a lot of time spent down in there for those 3 or 4 weeks during the runoff, and it paid off. Now I had run second in the primary to Rusty Glover in those counties, Baldwin and Mobile counties, but I carried them very strongly in the runoff.
Do you think what was more effective? Because you really raised more money and had more money than Cook or Rusty did.
Yes.
And I know you outspent them. Do you think that your strong showing was due to more to TV and having a TV presence where they didn't have it at all? I don't think they had TV at all, did they?
Stan Cook ran just a little TV. Don't believe Rusty was ever on TV. I know Stan Cook was on Fox News a little bit and possibly some other local shows. But to be fair, I would say yes. I think the TV ads made the difference because all 3 of us were hardworking candidates. There wasn't.
So you didn't necessarily think it was all because you outworked them?
No, I don't.
Because Rusty really did work.
Rusty worked really very
Uh-huh,
hard.
yeah.
And Stan Cook was everywhere I went. So if you were to say which one of the 3 of us worked the hardest at traveling the state, I don't know. We all worked really hard at it. But I know that I disciplined myself to sit on my couch and make fundraising phone calls for 3 or 4 hours a day.
That's a wise thing.
And I was able to double the previous state auditor fundraising record. I raised $300,000 for auditor, which is completely unheard of.
Unheard of, it really is.
Beth Chapman raised $136,000 when she ran and beat Wes Allen back in 2006. So I think I was able to do that for 2 reasons. Number one, I spent a lot of time at it, and I worked the state, traveled the state, and I made a lot of phone calls. But number 2, people saw how conservative I was in the legislature, and they knew I was a champion for Second Amendment rights and civil asset forfeiture reform and so many other issues. And I was always ranked at the top of the scorecards for the most conservative in the legislature. And it got me a lot of notoriety with the conservatives in the state, and they really came through and backed me.
Well, now, Andrew, there again, did you get some of the really conservative groups' endorsement too because of your voting record in the legislature?
Some of them.
You had a record where actually Rusty had one from the state senate, but Cook had no record.
That's
but then
true.
being a preacher, I guess is there a certain conservative Christian group or something that endorsed in that race?
So I'm going to be
did
honest
the gun
with
people
you.
endorse in the NRA?
They didn't, because the problem is me, Stan, and Rusty, all 3 of us are true constitutional conservatives. We're all very conservative. And it was very difficult to differentiate myself from somebody like Rusty Glover. Rusty Glover would probably agree with me on 99% of issues.
Right.
Stan Cook doesn't have the voting record, but I believe the man is a true conservative.
Right, I do too.
So it was more about name ID than it was about how would this person perform once they're in office, if that makes sense.
You know what I'm sort of surprised about is, so you had 300,000 you raised.
That's right.
And how much did Rusty and Cook have?
I don't believe either of them raised over 100,000. I believe if you combine what they spent, I still doubled them.
Okay.
So
good.
yeah, I would definitely outspend them. And then of course I put some of my own money in the race, and I bought my TV early. I was one of the first people to buy TV statewide because I'd raised my money early. I got good rates. I made smart buys, and I even did my own media buys.
So you knew how to do that.
I learned.
Okay. That's smart, Andrew. That's really because in that race you can't go out and pay a consultant. You're wasting your money.
That's right.
I mean, you're giving them money that you know how to do. You knew to work. You knew where to work.
I had friends that had run statewide, and they were able to give me very good advice. And I have friends in other states who are state legislators, and one of them happens to be a media buyer as her profession. And she was giving me basically free advice because she wanted me to win. So I didn't pay the consultants 15% to do my TV and my radio purchases. Well, Steve, you can do the math on a $500,000 ad buy. I saved $75,000.
That's exactly right.
That's a lot of extra TV ads.
It really is. That's really smart. And you showed a lot of savvy, too, in knowing where to go and be present and where to put your buy, like in that first primary to put it in the Wiregrass because there was no hometown person.
Yes.
And then in the Mobile thing and the runoff, because they did know Rusty was from Mobile because he had been in the Senate down there, the House down there, and
his dad, I believe, was in the state Senate.
Long years ago.
Yes.
From over there in the southwest part of the state.
Steve, I had an advantage, and that is, in 2009, I started volunteering in other people's campaigns. And I went to the Leadership Institute in 2010, and I learned to be a campaign manager. I went to a week-long school in Washington, D.C. How do you learn to run a good campaign? And I run my own polling. I don't rely on anybody else for polling. We did our own media buys. We do a lot of our own design, ad design, everything. I even wrote my own script for the TV ads.
Did you?
I did.
But you thought of putting your little girl in there too, didn't you?
I thought it would work. See, nobody knows what the state auditor does. And I thought, what would be funny is if I was explaining the state auditor job to a baby.
Exactly.
I thought and it was a huge hit.
I think they were brilliant ads.
Well, I appreciate that.
I think you've heard that, hadn't you?
Everywhere I go.
Because I voted for you because you're a little baby.
Liberty is a famous baby.
I know it. She really is.
I was in a meeting this morning and in the Capitol, and the lady sat down beside me, I'd never met before, and she leaned over, she said, "I loved your TV ads. Your baby is so cute."
I know it.
Yeah, it really worked.
That's how they know you.
And I'll tell you, for the runoff, we did a part 2 with my baby. And my wife wrote the script for that ad. Yeah,
So
people said that was even better.
All of her life too?
No, she hasn't. She just kind of saw what we had done in the first commercial. And Hannah hasn't been in politics, but she's got a great political mind, and she's able to give me guidance. Hannah was a communications major, and she's always giving me tips on public speaking. You know how nerve-wracking it is to have your wife in the back criticizing your, critiquing your public. I remember we spoke one time, there were about 5 of us, and I left and said, "How did I do?" I thought I'd given a great speech, and she said, "Well, you were the 4th best." I said, "Wow, that's pretty harsh," but she's given me a lot of tips to help me improve.
Andrew, talking about that now, did both of you went to school at North Alabama?
University of North Alabama. I sure did.
Did you major in political science?
I didn't. At the time, I graduated, by the way, I graduated UNA in 2 years, which is still a record up there.
I remember you telling me that now.
I raced through college. I graduated high school at 18, graduated college at 20, did it in less than 2 years.
Did you grow up in Muscle Shoals?
Yes, I sure did. And I stayed local to go to college. And I'm glad I did, because UNA doesn't have a lot of representatives down here in Montgomery. There's 5 or 6 of us,
Yeah.
And I think the guy who took my seat in House District 3, Kerry Underwood, you get to know him. He's a great guy. He's a UNA grad. But nonetheless, I wasn't that interested in politics in 2004, 2006 era. I majored in business.
You majored in business.
That's right.
You made your living in the business world.
I did. I always voted. My parents taught me to vote. So as soon as I turned 18, I went and registered to vote. Cast my first vote for George W. Bush in 2004. But as far as running myself, that never crossed my mind. And even when I started volunteering for other people's campaigns, it wasn't with the goal that I was going to run someday. I just got involved and started helping people. And sometimes you help people and they get elected and you're disappointed with what they do. They don't keep their campaign promises. And some of them do and some of them don't. And the longer you hang out with politicians, the less impressed you are. And finally one day you think, maybe I could do this. And you decide to run yourself. That's kind of my story.
Now is Hannah, is she from your area of the state, or is she from, where is she from originally?
You're not going to believe this, but I actually married a girl from New Hampshire originally.
Was she down in North Alabama in school or what?
No, so what happened was she moved to South Carolina to go to college, and her family were all living in South Carolina when I met her, but I didn't meet her in South Carolina. I met her in Rome. I was on a bus.
Italy?
That's correct. I was on a bus in Italy, and I saw a pretty girl, so I took the seat in front of her. I was 30 years old at the time.
Is she younger than you?
This is a true story. She's 7 years younger than me. True story.
She was 23.
She was.
I love this.
She had just graduated with her master's. She taps me on the shoulder. First question she asked me, do you like politics?
What? Out of the blue?
She might have heard me talking about politics with somebody else. I don't know, but that was the first. Not what's your name.
Well, had you thought you were going to get into it by the time you were 30?
By the time I was 30,
campaigns and all.
I had, but I knew I was going to run for State House District 3.
And when you weren't but like 32 when you were elected.
That's right. So this was about a year and a half before.
So you
the
already
election.
made the decision you were going to run.
I already knew I was running, and she asked me, "Do you like politics?"
Were you over there on a political trip or something?
No, it was actually a church history tour.
Okay.
And it was from Italy all the way. It ended in London.
Was she on the same kind of thing?
Yes, same tour. So
where is she going to school in South Carolina?
She went to Bob Jones University in Greenville, South Carolina, conservative Christian university.
Did she go to law school or anything? She was a communications major?
No, she was a middle school education, and then her master's was in communication. Yeah, so by the end of that 17-day trip.
Y'all sitting on the bus, and she's on the same thing, the church.
That's right, same tour.
Stuff.
Yes, and ask her for
a
phone number.
Did y'all just happen to see her?
Never met her before in my life. Turns out she knew my sister, which was really random. My sister had gone to the same college as her.
Your sister gone to Bob Jones in South Carolina?
That's correct. So I asked my sister later, I was like, why didn't you introduce me to Hannah when you met her? You know, just kind of joking with her. But they actually kind of knew each other.
About the same age group and everything?
They were 4 years apart or so. I think my sister was her camp counselor at some camp.
Is that right?
I mean, it's just such a small world, yeah. But by the end of that trip, we were already talking about getting married.
No, you were not.
We were. And Steve, I promise you, we'd only known each other for 34 days. And she calls me up. This is a true story. She says, are you okay with me penciling us in at my church for next June 30th?
Are you serious?
Yeah. And I said, yeah, that's fine with me. Go ahead.
I love it.
We sure did. We got married
a true love
year
story,
later.
isn't it?
Yeah, we just knew within a month we knew we were getting married.
And y'all had a big Valentine lunch today.
We sure did. She brought me lunch to the Capitol.
And brought Liberty up there.
Liberty crawled into the Capitol. I opened the door, and she's just learning to walk. So she'll toddle in, but if she thinks she can get somewhere faster by crawling, she'll just crawl.
You know, that ad may have been you got a good bang for your buck on your $300,000 in that campaign because you had good ads and you did them yourself. And that Liberty thing, it resonated.
It does.
You were like I know we're repeating what you said, but you were telling folks what the altar job did.
Yes.
And introduced them to your little girl, and they didn't know anybody else was running probably.
People want to know who you are in
do.
politics. It's not just about the position or what you want to do in the position. They want to know you. And I think people got a good sense for who I was, how we interacted as a family. My wife's a really good actor or actress. She did great on the commercials, you know, kind of like, please vote for my husband.
She really was when you think about it, yeah.
She did. She was funny.
Great, yeah.
And we dressed Liberty up in little outfits. You know, I was out there at the grill, and I'm talking about board of registrar appointments, and Liberty's just zoned out. She's got a little chef hat on, and she's chewing on a spoon, just listening to me drone on about the auditor job. And then I'm pushing her in the stroller, and she's just asleep, because she's so tired of listening to Daddy talk, you know.
Are you folks still doing well up there?
Yes.
You're young enough, your folks still living
My
there.
parents, her parents, both sets live in Muscle Shoals. After I married Hannah, her parents moved to Muscle Shoals.
Is that right?
Yeah.
How wonderful. They
sure
watch
did.
Liberty grow up and everything?
They do.
Are they retired?
Her parents are younger than mine.
Yeah,
So
you're 7 years.
That's right. So her parents are still, her dad still works. He's a pharmacist, and he works for a company that owns 5 pharmacies, and one of them is actually City Drug here in Montgomery. So my father-in-law occasionally ends up down here working.
Well, isn't that perfect?
Yeah, and he can just stay with us.
And
We
y'all
bought
a house down here. I saw your inauguration day. Y'all were heading out.
That's
right.
right.
When I was doing the interview up at the Capitol.
That's right, yep.
42. I said, there's old Andrew Sorrell. Now, you do say Sorrell, don't you?
So, yeah, that's a story. So, Sorrell is probably the right way to say it because a sorrel is a red horse.
Right.
But
everybody in the South says Sorrell, don't they?
Well, no, it's actually the reverse.
Okay.
All the Yankees say Sorrell.
Okay.
My granddad took a church in Detroit, and the Yankees just kept saying Sorrell, and he finally gave up and just went with it. So everybody down here, usually, if they don't know, they just guess Sorrell.
I've known a lot of Sorrells, they'll spell your name like you over the years, believe it or not. There's
Really?
many Sorrells down here, but they'll pronounce it differently. I have some say Sorrell, some say Sorrell.
Well, and a good example of that is there's a representative who I served with in the legislature.
From
Jeff,
Hartford.
Yes, and his name is Jeff Sorrell. So
And
he
I
has
would
an
get
S on
y'all
the end.
confused. I knew Jeff from the Wiregrass, you know.
That's right, yeah.
And you know, one thing about that, now he goes by Sorrells though.
He does go by
And
Sorrell.
you went by Sorrell
Yes,
when you were in the house.
that's right.
Would they call y'all's name and say it the right way?
Yes.
Like Mr. Sorrell, if he had a voice vote?
The first time the staff didn't know. And I went up there and I said, hey, just so you know, I said, I pronounce it Sorrell. And he was so apologetic. And I said, no, there's no way you could have known. I'm not offended. But I tell you, from that point forward, I mean, they got it right.
Do you know what I was getting around to tell you about Jeff Sorrell, who I call mayor? He was mayor of Hartford. And came the same year you did. You both
He
were
did,
freshmen.
that's right, yeah.
Even though he'd been mayor a long time, he's a lot older than you. But I've noticed this, that you make friends better in the House than in the Senate. And when y'all run, your housemates will help you in their area.
That is so true.
I bet a lot of them helped you in the Wiregrass.
I had a lot of support from House members, and it was invaluable because they know so many people.
They do. They know the district.
And you know what happens, Steve? You get about a week out, and people start saying, who are you voting for Public Service Commission, Treasurer? People know who they're voting for Governor.
Right.
They know who they're voting for U.S. Senate.
Right.
But on down the ballot, they make that decision at the end, right at the last few days.
Maybe when they walk in the ballot.
Some of them do. They walk in, they say, have I ever seen this name before? Oh, I saw Andrew Sorrell in a commercial with his daughter, and they'll bubble your name in. That's how a lot of people vote.
Do you know one thing, too? And I've told people this. If I were starting to run a campaign, you've done exactly, run a perfect campaign. I've told them two things, exactly what you're saying, run for second office. I said, I know it's tempting to accept every Rotary Club speech that's offered to you because they want a free speaker, you know, at the Scottsboro Rotary Club.
Sure, right.
Or the Dothan Rotary Club or the Rehoboth or anyway. And it's tempting, but Muscle Shoals is way up here.
Yes.
And if you're from Dothan, you're way down here.
Yes.
I mean, this is a long stay, as you find out running statewide. Your time is better spent being nice to the Rotarians in Scottsboro or Dothan. Say, look, I appreciate it, you know, but I've got other obligation. And that obligation would be sitting on the phone and dialing for dollars.
That's right.
If you took that day, it would take you to drive to make a speech to 35 Rotarians who you may have won them over.
Yeah.
But that's 35 votes.
You probably did. If you go speak to him, you probably do win most of them over.
Uh-huh.
The problem is the next month they have your opponent in.
Exactly.
And he wins half of them back.
Exactly.
So you all end up going fighting over the same 35 votes.
And if you're wise, you spent that time driving to the Rotary Club in the Valley, calling
on the phone.
Even if you just get $25, you know, or $50.
What I would do is I would schedule fundraising calls. So I had somebody that would listen to my calls, and they're making notes about you know who pledged what, you know, when I need to call them back, all that. So I didn't have to worry about that. I could just make phone calls as fast as I could. And I have about 2,300 contacts in my phone. I thought that was pretty good. I talked to somebody this morning who's got 5,000, so he knows a lot more people than I do. But yeah, just disciplining yourself. I got 1,000 contributions, something, I forget, I was somewhere between 400 and 500 unique donors, which is a pretty good donor base, especially for state auditor. And I did fundraising, I did well for fundraising both for State House and for state auditor. And both times, money isn't the only thing that matters, but it matters more statewide than it does locally.
It does.
You see people win in the state legislature with $20,000. They beat incumbents, or they beat people with $200,000. You say, how did they do that? Well, they knocked every door in the district. That's how they did it. But you can't knock every door statewide. How do you get your message out to 5 million Alabamians in the 3 weeks before the primary? The only way is mass advertising, which typically means TV.
It is. It really is. We ain't got about 3 minutes left. Real quickly, you've been inundated, I'm sure. One of the biggest things about auditor is naming your board of registrars.
Yes.
I bet that's been a tough call. How do you have, but I want to also congratulate you. I think it's a wise move to retain Hope.
Oh, everybody says that.
Who was Ziegler's AA, if you
Yes.
will.
Everybody loves her.
She knows everybody, you know.
She really does. She's been invaluable. People said, are you going to come in and clean house and do new staff? And I said, are you kidding? The staff are the people who know what's going on.
Exactly.
I need to retain them.
You do. That was smart of you to do that. But have you retained most of the registrars, or you had to have some of your friends who were campaigning for you that want to be a registrar in Etowah County or Crenshaw County or whatever?
So I was very, very careful. I did not make any promises for Board of Registrar seats in exchange for campaign support. I just refused to do that. And the truth is, the registrars we have in the state are really, really good. And I think we have some of the best elections.
Especially in metropolitan areas.
Yeah,
You've got to be
absolutely.
careful changing them for political reasons in metropolitan areas.
You do. You have to be very careful.
It's a pretty sophisticated job.
But
it ain't like it used to be, where
it's getting harder.
some 80-year-old person dialed in there and said, well, what day is it? You know, I got to register 15 people and I'm going home at 4 and taking a nap. You know,
that's right.
It's pretty.
It's on computers now, and they're redrawing the district lines after redistricting by the legislature.
Right.
This is tough work.
It really is, and very little pay. I think some of the metropolitan areas may pay them a little bit.
They do.
They still make a paltry amount of money.
Well, there's no benefits. It's hard to find qualified people to do it. So these aren't exactly things you hand out necessarily as political favors, but getting the right people in there is important. And to that end, if I have registrars serving who were appointed by Jim Ziegler and they're doing a good job and I don't have any complaints about them, those people are all going to get reappointed. And those appointments are due September 30th.
Oh, it's not. You don't do it to September 30th.
I don't do it. I'm so thankful I have 8 months to parse through them. Now, since I've been auditor, we've already had 3 vacancies, though. So I've already filled 3 vacancies.
Are they still mostly older retired people, though, aren't they?
They are. Usually it's a retired state employee.
Yeah. Especially in rural areas.
Yeah. But I'm reaching out to local legislators and getting input from them.
That's important. That gives them the patronage. They kind of want to tell you who to be there, too.
Well, and they know. I mean, if you have a vacancy in Cherokee County, I mean, I went there, campaigned a little bit. I don't know that many people
Jenny
in Cherokee
Shaver knows,
County,
though.
But Jenny knows them.
And her husband's a sheriff.
Yeah, that's right.
And they both, you did a wise
everybody.
thing. You're doing a wise
Well, and I know all these legislators, so I know I can trust them. So Corley Ellis made a recommendation on the Shelby County, and you know what? I think she's going to be fantastic. Everybody I ask about her says, oh, we really like her.
You need to be careful in those urban areas. You got to keep, if they know what they're doing, because that's a pretty big job in those urban areas.
It is. You're right. That's Shelby County. That's an important one.
It really is.
They're very, very busy in that office.
Andrew, I hate to tell you, our time's up.
I can't believe it. It went by so fast. We can do this another half hour.
Let's do it another time.
All right, we'll do it.
We will. Folks, our guest tonight's been Andrew Sorrell, the state auditor, 37 years old, with a wife named Hannah and a little girl named Liberty.
That's right.
Y'all may remember from the ads. And he's just starting his first 4-year term as our state auditor. We thank you for being with us, Andrew, and we thank our viewers for watching. Hope y'all turning in next week for Alabama Politics. Thank you.